the whole idea of Argo and the sort of the ludicrousness of the idea, or our opinion about that. I'm the one who would ask people, like, when I think about the idea of making this a big science fiction film, and that they're supposed to be Canadians, but it's an American science fiction film, it just doesn't make sense. Like, what do you think of that? And that's when they started opening up and saying, yeah, it's ridiculous. But Tony Mendez feels like what it was this brilliant sort of sleight of hand. It got the six people so into the plot, so into making this fascinating film as opposed to a dry documentary about the revolution, that it distracted them from the fact that they might die in a couple of days. That's one thing actually I want to mention, that Tony Mendez only got to Tehran about 2 or 2.5 days before the exfiltration. When you watch Argo, you think he's been there for weeks. Of course, he had to hatch the plan and get the Hollywood support and all that. But, you know, Ken Taylor was there. The Canadian government had already issued the passports. Well, you heard that the CIA made the mistake with the dates and almost had them killed that way. But they had already come up with all this false identities and the health cards and the business cards, and in Ken Taylor's mind, there's no doubt that they would have gotten them out. The thing is, they're Americans, so you can't do it unilaterally as Canadians. You needed to have the cooperation, and that's when they assigned Tony Mendez. But yeah, I continue to think it's a ridiculous thing, and they're lucky because at the airport they knew they were not questioned at all. And as Drew said, the Canadians did such a good job sheltering them that nothing happened, and Ben Affleck, you know, poor Ben Affleck had to come up with all this embellishment that never happened. And at the airport, nothing happened either. Oh yes, there was a tea break. But in Argo, you know, there's all this questioning and everything. One thing that did happen though, which we just, and I don't like talking about things that are interesting that aren't in our film, but
you do it a lot.
I do it a lot. but Joe Stafford, the one who was in Sudan now, started feeling this moral ambivalence. Had we interviewed him, we would have talked about it. This moral ambivalence about deserting the other 52. And he thought maybe they should give themselves up and go back to the embassy, the 6 of them, and turn themselves in, which would have been awful. It was a terrible thing to think. But he sort of didn't play along with the identities that they took on. And in fact, in the newspaper, in the airport, he was picking up a Farsi newspaper and he was reading it, which totally goes against their cover identities. They shouldn't know the language. He had learned the language. And that could have blown the identity, and somebody else had to rip it away from him. It was like almost this weird death wish or desire to fail. So that happened. That's not in Argo, I don't think. Also not in Argo is the fact that they enter a plane that says Argo, which is such a Hollywood touch. I don't know what's wrong with them. Other questions?